Hi, everyone. I am so excited to bring you another guest. And this guest is going to talk to my young people, which I am so excited about because I know a lot of my guests are for the parents, but parents, you're going to get stuff out of this too. But I have Amy Williams with me, and she is an educator and family coach. She is an expressive arts therapist, but she specializes in dance movement. She coaches teachers and families, and she even works directly with children, mostly elementary, but really could work with any age. And I'm going to put all of her connections in the show notes so that you can connect with her, follow her, watch her videos, whatever it is that you would like to do. And so, Amy, thank you so much for being with us today.
Well, thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Well, we are going to talk about a topic that I have not had any episodes on, which now at 130 whatever, I can't believe I haven't talked about this because I know how important it is. And so I'm so excited that I have someone to talk about it, but it's consent. And sometimes we don't know what consent is. And especially depending on how old my listeners are, some of them might not have heard this word before. So we're going to talk about what is it and all the things about it.
Right on. I'm so excited that you're making the time to have this conversation. I can tell you that the folks that I've worked with, a lot of adults, when I ask the question, when did you first learn about consent? There's, like crickets in the room, and
Mhm.
people say, never, or in my adulthood, or today.
Yes.
So often it's a new concept for folks who are in the age of parenting and grandparenting and beyond.
Mhm.
I think right now our young people are talking about it more. I think it's more a topic of conversation that they're talking with each other about, and they're talking with other people or listening to other people talk about it. Music, there's a lot of music out there that really drives home that message of
Mm.
our own power and our own autonomy, and what we say goes, and we
Mhm.
can change our mind and all that kind of thing.
I
So I'm
love it.
happy that I believe a new wave of people are coming up and growing older and talking about that with
Mhm.
more normalcy. And still, there are pockets where it's still taboo, like we don't talk about that, or you know, one type of person does this and it's expected that they say and do this, and then another type of person, the
Mhm.
expectations are different.
Mhm.
So I'm happy to bring forward the conversation yet again.
Yay, I love it. So what is your definition of consent?
Consent in a broad sense is asking permission, to ask permission to do something or to say something, and then waiting for an answer. Right. The
Mhm.
second piece of that is to listen for, enthusiastic yes or a clear firm no. How do you listen for it? How do you respectfully take the next step, even though you really may want to do something? What can you do?
Mhm.
How do you say yes clearly? How do you say no clearly, so other people can hear us and we can speak with strength and clarity? Um, but I believe an important piece that we forget to talk about and to practice is the listening for it.
Mm.
Asking consent to play kittens on the playground, or to go out on to do something together, or to do something more private together. We ask those questions, and then we got to wait for the answer.
Mhm.
The answer right then and there, which might be yes and it might be no. Oh my gosh. And they might change their mind, or I
Mm.
might change my
Mhm.
mind.
Mhm.
Or, well, what about today? Well, the other day and the other day and the other day, you said yes, and then today is no. What's up with that? So
Mhm.
we have the power to change our minds and the power to say yes or no on different days.
Mhm. Oh, thank goodness. Like I did not know this when I was younger and I made a lot of I don't know, I did a lot of things because I didn't feel like I could say what I really wanted to do. And especially if I'd already said yes one time, then I felt like I was obligated in some way. And that comes from some people pleasing things that go on with me, but just and I think a lot of people do have people pleasing, but I'm just so glad to know that we're starting to teach about how to do this,
Right.
and that the next generation hopefully will not struggle so much with, you
Right.
know, being involved in that kind of stuff. So where do you start? Like when you are working with young people on this topic, what is one of the very first things you start with?
The first thing we start with is what is consent, like the definition of consent.
Mm-hmm.
And then we move on. Once that's clear, we talk about what is it, when is it important to seek consent? You know, whether if you're going to do something together, if you're going to borrow something, if you're going to tell a story or tell somebody's news to somebody else,
Mm.
hugs, kisses, and beyond. Those are the times when it's important to ask for consent, right? So that's kind of the second piece, is when is it important, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let's see, what does consent sound like? What does an enthusiastic yes sound like? And it could be yes, and it could be sure, or of course, or absolutely. So it can
Mm-hmm.
have a varying degree of enthusiasm, but
Mm-hmm.
you get what the yes is, right?
Mm-hmm.
And everybody has their own way of saying that. So what does consent sound like? And what does a no sound like, right? What is the language that you use? No, yet, no, no way, absolutely not, or, whatever you might say, right? So that's a next piece that we talk about and practice. Sometimes we do role play and we do some drama and theater to practice that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then we talk about, well, what ifs?
Mm,
Well, what
yes.
if, but you really want to hug that person, or you really want to kiss that person, but they say no, but they're smiling. Does that mean
Mm-hmm.
yes, or does that mean no? I don't know. It's
Mm-hmm.
unclear. So
Mm-hmm.
we talk about when it's unclear, then it's a no.
Okay, that's
Unless you get
perfect.
it. Yeah. If you're not sure, or they're kind of laughing nervously, or you get a gut feeling, your intuition is saying, right,
Mm-hmm.
then that's a no.
Well, and I
Try again
think
later, maybe tomorrow.
I was going to ask the question too when you were talking about, saying no.
Mhm.
There, it sounds like there probably is a really importance of having a verbal no, a verbal confirmation of no, instead of like how someone would react. Like I
Mhm.
could picture like not wanting to do something and drawing back, but maybe being too afraid to say that you don't want to do it. And
Mhm.
so, I mean, how do you teach that they need to verbally be saying some kind of negative or no response instead of just a reaction, or are reactions okay as long as the message is clear? I don't tell me about that.
Okay. It's important when we're talking about this topic that we speak and teach and practice both sides, right?
Okay.
So the
Mhm.
person who is asking for consent, and the person who is giving consent,
Mhm.
or not, right?
Mhm.
So it's important to really help both sides understand, what to listen for. What does an
Mhm.
enthusiastic yes sound like? And what does a clear, firm no sound like? And what does a mushy yes sound like? And a mushy yes is a no,
Okay.
unless just there. Clear, enthusiastic yes is a yes, right?
Okay.
So we could talk about specific scenarios depending on, who the audience is and what questions I might have, or experiences that they may have been in. Like,
Mhm.
I wanted to, and we started and it was great. And then, I
Yeah.
started feeling weird or
Mhm.
uncomfortable. And then I didn't know what to do. Right.
Mhm.
So we can talk through, what can you do? Because
Yeah.
it will probably happen again, and
Mhm.
you'll have another opportunity, right?
Mhm.
So how do those feelings, gut feelings people talk about, or intuition,
Mhm.
or
Mhm.
that weird spidey sense that you might get, like, I don't want to do this anymore, or, I just don't, no, I'm
Mhm.
done. We're
Mhm.
finished. It's time to
Yeah.
stop. And it takes a lot of courage to be able to
Mhm.
speak clearly and say, yeah, no. Right.
Mhm. Mhm.
So we could talk to the other side, the other part in the relationship and the communication and the conversation, and teach into the respect piece.
Mhm.
what about your friend or the person that you're with? And they say yes, 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 and then they say no. Then that's a full stop, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You can always come back to it later,
Mm-hmm.
maybe tomorrow, maybe the next
Mm-hmm.
day, whatever. But teaching and speaking to both sides, both partners
Mm-hmm.
in the partnership is important, because the
Mm-hmm.
responsibility doesn't just sit with the person saying yes or no.
Right. Well, and we'll be in both sides of the situation at some point. And
Absolutely.
so we have to know what to do both ways. Something that my daughter taught me, because she is oh gosh, she's a millennial. And so, they started, the ones talking, I feel like they started kind of talking about consent, or they were one of the first generations to start talking about it. And so she's taught me a lot of stuff about it because I didn't know anything about it. And
Uh-huh.
she said the thing that meant the most to me when she was talking to me about consent was that if you're under the influence of alcohol or drugs, you can't give consent.
Yep.
And I love that. And so I'm sure we didn't talk about that before this, but I'm sure you have something that you kind of talk about in that realm too. And that was my favorite part so far about consent, is because I got involved in a lot of things because I didn't really know what I was saying yes to. And so tell us about that.
Sure. And I think all of us who've reached any kind of age or have had any experience have been in that position, because
Uh-huh.
that's this reality, right?
Yes. Yes.
So yes, teaching into both sides of the partnership that, somebody who is altered or high or drunk or in some ways not able to make that decision, that's always a no, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There's a YouTube video that I saw forever ago about tea. Like asking someone to have sex is like having tea, right? So you can say, hey, would you like some tea today? And then they say yes, and you boil the tea and you do the steep the tea bag, whatever, and you bring it to them and they enjoy the tea. And that's wonderful. Or you boil the water, steep the tea, and you bring it, and they go, oh yeah, no, I decided I didn't want that. And that means no. Or
Mm-hmm.
you boil the tea, you boil the water, you steep the tea, you come, and they're asleep. People who are asleep cannot give consent. People who
Uh-huh.
are passed out cannot give consent. So don't
Mm-hmm.
pour the tea. Don't continue to, make them
Mm-hmm.
drink the tea because you went to all the trouble to make it, right?
Right.
Because you go to all the trouble to make the tea does
Mm-hmm.
not mean that that person wants to receive that tea. And people who
Right.
are asleep or who are passed out, they don't want tea.
Mm-hmm.
They don't want tea. They can't tell you they want tea.
Mm-hmm.
So don't make them drink the
Mm-hmm.
tea.
Well, and
So
I was thinking that even people who are altered in some way may say yes because their inhibitions, are not, their thinking brain is not working. And
mhm,
they're like, yeah, sure, I want to do that. When they don't have when their thinking brain isn't working, that's not a time to take, oh, well, they said yes. So,
right,
it's totally fine for me to do this. So that's why I loved, that if anyone is, using drugs, drinking, or in any way altered, that's just not even a conversation, because they can't have consent if they don't know what they're saying. And especially if they're passed out or not even verbally able to do anything. But
right,
I've just been thinking about so many of students I've had over the years that, would have said yes in a situation being altered, either by being drunk or high or something. And then later we're like, oh my gosh, I cannot believe that I did that.
right, right.
Or that, that was taken advantage of. So,
And there's plenty of opportunity to say yes, um,
hmm,
and to have a consensual act happen between
right.
people.
Yes.
I mean,
Yes.
that's great, and it
Hmm.
happens. And
Yeah.
more of that, please, when it's
Yeah.
consensual on both sides.
Yes, definitely.
Um, but yeah, I appreciate you bringing up the point of when somebody is out of it in any
Hmm.
way, then that's a no.
Yeah, I love that so much.
Mm.
So then you do this kind of role playing where they can practice both
Mhm.
sides, do you do group work as well, like with groups, or do you mostly do one to one, or is it always groups, or how does it work?
Right now, it's one-to-one. I've certainly done groups and have had this conversation with classrooms. talk about that, and use the metaphor of tea, and use the
Mhm.
metaphor of playing soccer. And with
Mhm.
even younger students, preschoolers, I've talked with classrooms of preschoolers about consent. And, instead of tea or soccer, we talk about playing kittens on the playground,
Mhm. Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Who
I
wants
love
to
that.
play kittens? They don't want to play kittens. They change their mind in the middle of playing kittens, right?
Yeah.
So when you have that conversation early, it becomes part of
Yes.
their experience. And so they can transfer that information and that experience to when the stakes are higher or the stakes are
Mhm.
different, and it's prom night or it's
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
I have a question that just came up to me, but I had a student one time, high school student,
Mhm.
and they came to me and they said that their teacher was hugging them and they didn't like it. And they told their teacher not to hug them, and the teacher kept hugging them. And so that's a consent issue. And
Mhm.
so I went to that teacher and I said, so and so student doesn't want to be hugged. And so I'm here to say that, because I think they were afraid of telling the teacher. And I was like, okay, well, I'll help you by helping take care of this. And the teacher said, well, I'm going to keep hugging them because they are so standoffish. And whenever I hug them, I end up getting them to smile or something like that. And I don't think it was a sexual issue at all. I think it was just this was a teaching technique that they thought worked. And I said, well, we have to think about, some people have been traumatized by touch. And so, we always need to be asking students. I mean, I am not a non-hugger I was a school counselor for 25 years, and kids need hugs and kids wanted hugs. But I would say, I always said, "Do you want a mom hug?" Because I always felt like I was their surrogate parent when I was when I was their mom while they were at school. And, sometimes kids would be like, "Oh, yes." And you could just feel them like melt into you because they needed an adult who loved them and cared for them. But other kids would be like, "No." And I was totally fine either way because I want them to be comfortable. And if they don't want me to hug them, and I know kids have been traumatized, and I
Mhm.
don't want to be further traumatizing them. So I was thinking how it is if a student's in a situation at school or in some, maybe a boss or whatever, where someone's over them and they feel like, oh gosh, I can't say that I don't want them to do this, but I don't like it. What kind of situation, how could you help them?
Wow, that's really hard. And it happens a lot. There is often a power imbalance. I mean,
Mhm.
you as the counselor had power, you were in a position of power, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
A teacher is in a position of power, a
Mhm.
parent is in a position of power. And if you think about all the important adults in the lives of children, they are in a position of power, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
So it's important for those people who sit in a position of power to have this conversation, and maybe you listen to this podcast too, and to define what is my responsibility in this. How do I want to show up as an important adult for this kid, for
Mhm.
this other person, right? Do I want a role model that someone respects them enough to listen to their yes or to listen to their no? And they're not going to be broken by it or get their feelings hurt or,
Mhm.
in some way will retaliate or withhold love or affection tomorrow or the next day,
Mhm.
right? That's some work that needs to be done, important adult to important adult, right?
Mhm.
It's not the responsibility of the children to teach the adults who or
Right.
others who are in power what they need to do, what their
Mhm.
responsibility is. That's an ask that is not, it's just not an ask that we make as important
Mhm.
adults. We
Mhm.
need to do our own work, right?
So, kind of what you're saying then is the student, it isn't their job to get the teacher to pay attention or do it right or get their boss to listen to them. If they've said at some point, I don't like that or I don't want you to do that, and the person keeps doing it, then they need to, like this student did, find a trusted adult, another person that has more power in the situation to help intervene or talk with that person.
Yeah. What you're talking about is finding an upstander.
Mhm.
It's
Yeah.
finding somebody who will stand up. And often
Mhm.
it's another adult or a person who is not in the situation, who's not
Mhm.
emotionally invested, or who's not in the situation where they're feeling frozen or they don't know what to say or they're
Mhm.
freaking out or they're nervous, whatever.
Mhm.
who are the people around you in your friend network in middle school and high school and beyond? I mean, we could think about our work friends who
Yeah.
I have 2 or 3 that come to mind, like who are my upstanders at work?
Yeah, I
It's
have some too.
Andrea. She's the one. She's going to stand up when I can't. Right. So we have those people that we could go to. And if we don't have those people, can we cultivate them? Right. I think the word upstander, it's kind of a newish word. I wish I made it up, but I didn't. But it is about someone who stands up, right?
Yeah.
When someone else maybe cannot stand up for whatever reason, right? Maybe that person is passed out. So
Right.
who's the upstander who's going to stand up and say, hey, knock it off. He's asleep, or
Yes.
he's not available, or they
Right.
said no, right? It takes a lot of courage to be that upstander in middle school, in high school, in the workplace,
Yeah.
because you put yourself out there, right? So it takes courage and a certain amount of vulnerability, right? And oftentimes, Cynthia, people say, I don't want to be an upstander because I don't want them to say anything to me. So what happens is I become a bystander and I
Yes.
stand by. And I might look the other way, or I might even laugh, or I might get involved in the situation, which is not helpful or useful or kind or respectful. And I can't remember who said it, but something along the lines of, that which you are silent about, you condone.
Yes.
So if you
I
are
was
a
thinking about
bystander,
that.
if you're a bystander, I'm saying by my standing by that that's okay. Whatever's happening, if somebody's being a jerk to somebody else at work, or if somebody is doing something to somebody else on the playground or in the classroom or whatever in the cafeteria, I'm saying it's okay by looking the other way, or I'm just going to leave, right? That's standing by.
Yeah.
So where in our lives can we practice standing up, right? So for those who upstander is a new concept, I recommend, and we actually, in the work that I do, we practice standing up and look for places and times when we can stand up. And once we stand up once and twice and more, it becomes, not that it becomes easier, but we're well rehearsed, right? So we're ready for when it's hard. It's like, yeah, been here before. It's hard. You say mean stuff to me too, but okay, whatever. I've heard that before, and I'm still going to stand up because it's who I am. It's how I want to show up in the world right now, when I'm 14, when I'm 18, when I'm 28, when I'm 48, when I'm 58. That's the person I want to be. I want to be an upstander, not a bystander.
Yeah, I love
And
that.
look, I have a little pen. This is an upstander.
Oh, it's so cute. Well, because you have written some books about this stuff, right?
Yeah, I have. I have a series of books. I call them SOCIMO books, social emotional books. So they're books about things that are social emotional. And the target audience is important adult and young child, but the message is universal, right? So it can be about, anybody could read it, right? But it's written in a really simple way, as clear as I could get it. And it invites conversation between the important adult, whether it be a teacher or parent or family member, reading to a younger child. There are prompts in there that you can talk about. When did I learn about consent? I'm still learning, kiddo, right? Or when did I have someone do something that was kind of mean, or who was a bully to me? What did I do? How did I feel? What did I do when I had a huge emotion and I felt so furious, I just wanted to punch somebody right in the face? What did I do? Right? So it invites that kind of conversation. So I have books. One is about managing big emotions. That one's called Wow, That Was a Big Emotion. And then another one is How to Ask a Friend to Play, because I was hearing so much that coming through the pandemic, we, not just children, but adults too, we forgot how to ask friends to play. Remember the first time going to a restaurant when things started opening up? And you forgot how to, wait, how do I be social?
Right. Well, and I couldn't stop being scared of everything because I kept thinking, am I going to get sick because I go there? And then feeling guilty if I went somewhere, because then when I went, like, what if I caught something there and then I go over here and this person gets sick? I mean, it was, yeah, all that stuff was terrible. And I just try to forget about it, but we don't really forget about it.
No, no.
Yeah.
And in some circumstances, we have to just learn a different way,
Yeah.
right? And practice and rehearse. And with that
Mhm.
rehearsal and with that practice, it becomes easier, right?
Yes. Yes.
But the book that's specific about what we're talking about today is this one.
Ooh.
It's called Consent. What is that anyway? Yeah. So it talks about, when to ask for consent. It talks about what is consent. It talks about what does it sound like? When do we need to ask for consent? What if the person said yes and then changed their mind? But what if I really want to do it and they still
Mhm.
say no? I'm still gonna, right? And then what do you do if you don't give consent? What does it
Mm.
sound like? And
Mhm.
as another person, what do I do when I hear a no or a yes? Right.
Okay. And
So it
as
was
another
written with the
standard,
right, right,
what
for
would
sure.
they say? Okay.
Mhm.
I love that. There's just so many things with this, but I think this is a great beginning for all of our conversations about consent and what and really to think about the power of being able to control situations and without like, oh, I gotta do what they want because they might get mad or they don't like, there's so many things that we can do to do the things that we want to do and still keep our friends and still have the relationships and stuff. And I think I'm just glad we're talking about this. And
Yeah,
you're right. I think schools are doing this more. And so kids maybe are more savvy to the word. I just know I think it's probably been in the last 5 to 10 years, I really started hearing about it. And I'm like, oh, where was this when I was younger? I wish I knew these things.
right.
And now as a grandparent, I've heard about them talking about make asking your grandchildren, "Can I hug you? Can I kiss you?" as part of consent, and I hadn't even thought about that before. But yeah, I don't own these children. They are their own people, and even
Absolutely.
though I love them so much and I barely cannot be touching them at all times, I want them to be good with that, and I want them to be okay when when I do choose to hug them or kiss them and that they say that it's okay.
Right. Because they're part of it. They're
Mhm.
in that hug alongside you. So if
Mhm.
they want to do it or not. And it
Yeah.
teaches them early on that they have agency, that they have
Yeah.
power, that
Yeah.
what they say, other people can respect that and they can
Mhm.
expect respect for their words.
Yes. Yes. And I do think just like with the example with the teacher who was like, "Well, I'm going to do it anyway because I get a smile out of them." And I never did get that person there to change their mind. And I do one of the things that you had
Wow.
said was to not take it personal if somebody doesn't give consent. And I think that that is probably the main thing that causes people like teacher to kid or maybe even like grandparent to grandchild. I
Mhm.
mean, it doesn't mean that it wouldn't hurt my feelings if my grandchildren said, "No, I don't want a hug," but I'm an adult and I should know this isn't a personal attack against me. This
Right.
is just what their preference is today. Tomorrow, like you said, I could ask to maybe they're in a bad mood or maybe they just are
Maybe their skin
tired
is
or they don't like
itchy
it.
and
Yeah.
maybe they
Yeah,
feel like
like
they smell bad and they don't want anybody to hug them. I mean,
yeah, like there's so
we have
many
no
things.
idea. Right.
Yes, and so it doesn't have to mean anything bad about my relationship with them and I think that maybe this teacher was like, "Well, this is how I'm building a relationship." And I keep thinking back to that and I wish I would have handled it differently, but like there's other ways to build a relationship with a
Right.
student other
Right.
than that. And so I don't
Well,
know, but
clearly there was some room for that teacher to grow and still
uh-huh.
learn. And I hope that they've had some experience and some teaching and mentorship and some
Mhm.
learning that sometimes a laugh is not happiness, but a laugh
Right.
is anxious. Like, oh,
Yeah.
this feels really
Mhm.
awkward. Ha 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 ha. Sure,
Yeah.
I'll do that.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's not an enthusiastic, clear yes, which
Yeah.
is a no. So bless
So
your heart, or bless this teacher's heart. I hope that they've learned because
yes.
I don't want another child to be in that position where they feel like someone in a place of power is
Mm.
taking advantage.
Yeah. And I can see where adults getting this kind of training is just as important as kids because we haven't been taught this before. We haven't been practicing this very much in our lives. And so I could see where that would be just as important to have the staff or any adults in power
Mhm.
having this training and then alongside or in addition to the students and children getting it too. So, well,
Well,
I'm
that's
so
something
glad.
that it's something that I do. So if there are any educators out there, I can bring this to your family community or your teacher community, to bring it to your classroom community. It's something
That's
I'm
perfect.
really, it's very important to me that
Hmm.
this message gets out to more than just you and me, but
Yeah.
to children and teenagers and adults out there
Hmm. Well,
and
that is
everywhere.
something that's my main goal this year. I want people to know that there's so many people, so many resources out here for young people. I went to an in-service on Friday where they were talking about the wait list for kids to get into mental health facilities is like 4 to 6 months and all this stuff. And I just want families to know there's so many people out here doing this good work.
Right.
And, you just reach out to, whoever.
Mhm.
Um, Even though we do have like mental health providers, possibly not enough of them.
Mhm.
If you just go out all over the whole United States and even the world, there are people out there that you can get information from, help from, and
Mhm.
I just want people to know who's all out there doing the good
Right.
work. So
Yeah.
I appreciate that you were with us today. And this is such an important topic. I feel like I want to do some other stuff with it. So I'm thinking on that. But um,
Part two.
that's right. That's what I was thinking too. And I love what your idea about bullying because that's a huge one that kids complain about a lot. And
Mm.
there's so many pieces to that. My daughter and I did an episode on bullying once because she was bullied as a young person and kind of how we dealt with it together and dealt with the school and different things. But it would be fun to do another episode and talk about the upstander because we've heard about the bystander for forever, but the upstander is kind of a newer word. And I love the idea of it because that's really the important piece, I think, in this whole thing
Sure
for
enough.
what we talked about today and for other topics too. So thank
Mhm.
you for being with us and definitely contact Amy if you have some questions about this. You want to buy your books. I'm going to put all the links in my show notes so you can buy the stuff, contact her, all the things. So thank you for
That's
being with
awesome.
us. Talk to you.